Hello everyone, I hope you are doing good. And in this class, we will discuss about the calls in arrears. A company that shares and receives the money upon such share application and further dues is known as the share call money, which can be arrears or advance. What happens when we are doing or when we are calling for the share call? Sometimes some people pay their money in advance and some people just do not pay at time. They just default the call. So the defaulters are known as the arrears and the one who pays them in the advance are known as the calls in advance. In accountancy, these two terms are essential to learning and making of the balance sheet. In the corporate world, the balance sheets are dependable on the calls and money, calls in arrears and calls in advance. If some money is called upon the shares and it is not paid before the specific due date, it will be called by the name of calls in arrears. Calls in advance are the advanced payments or the excess payment made to the called due as the calls in advance, which cannot be shown by the company as the capital unless such due is from the shareholders. Okay, अगर shareholders ने पहले ही पे कर दिया है so you will show in the balance sheet, otherwise not. A group of the people makes a company that contributes the money to their common purpose. The contributed money is the share capital by the company and the contributors are the shareholders. It can be both profitable and non-profitable. So ये तो basic सी definition है for the company, but call scenarios, if you are giving something in advance, it is the calls in advance, and if the amount is due and you have not paid it, it is the calls in arrears. So we will talk about the concept of calls in arrears. The calls in arrears are the amount that is called with respect to sharing and if not paid before the due date. The call money can also be called the allotment money and the company can call it. If any failure or default arises to send the call money, it may be known as the calls in arrears. For the calls in arrears, a separate account should be opened and maintained. Okay. So calls in arrears का अपना एक अलग separate account होता है. The account applied in the call of the arrear can be reflected in the share capital of the balance sheet. It is shown as the deducted amount of the subscribed but not fully paid under subscribed capital. तो ये कहाँ show होता है? Subscribed share capital में under not fully paid subscribed capital. Okay. The amount is known as the paid up capital. This amount is known as the paid up capital and the change of the interest, and the charge of the interest at 10% per annum is chargeable in the calls in arrears. So in the calls in arrears, the amount of interest which we charge from the shareholders is 10% per annum. Though it depends on the provision of the articles of the company itself, the company directors have the right to cut off or waive off the interest on the call in arrears calls. अगर चाहें कंपनी के डायरेक्टर्स तो they can waive off, but they have to pay. In general parlance, it is 10% per annum. Calls in arrears. Then we'll talk about the calls in advance. The calls in advance are the excessive amount received by any company in advance upon which they have been called up. If the company is allowed and authorized by its articles, it may accept the amount from the shareholders. The advance amount can be transferred to the account specifically opened for the calls in advance, known as the calls in advance. अगर कंपनी चाहे तो एडवांस पेमेंट रिसीव कर सकती है अपने शेयर होल्डर्स से एंड उसको कॉल्स इन एडवांस हेड में या अपने कॉल्स इन एडवांस अकाउंट में शो कर सकती है. द अमाउंट दैट द कंपनी डज नॉट कॉल should not be credited to the capital account. It appears separately on the company's balance sheet as its liabilities. To make the shares fully paid, the companies may rescind such amounts. Once the amount gets transferred to the account, it can be known as the calls in advances closed. What happens till that particular call is not due? You keep that amount in the calls in advance account, and after that the call becomes due, the calls in advance account is closed and that amount is transferred to the specific amount or to the specific call. It comes under the name of the current liabilities till the calls are made. Okay. For the company, it is the current liability. कब तक? Till the calls are made and the amount becomes payable by the shareholders. Okay. Now let us talk about the interest for the calls in advance. The amount received through the calls in advance is known as the company's liabilities. The company is liable to pay the interest in the amount from the date of receiving till the date of the due payment. 12% rate of interest is charged on these calls in advance and the company's articles agrees. The amount of the calls in advance is 12% and the interest has to be paid to the shareholder even if the company has not made any profit or earned any. If a shareholder is paying you in advance, then it is your liability to pay him the interest for the particular period from the call due amount to the payment which he has made. And that is 12% per annum. Okay. Now, what is the difference between the calls in advance and the calls in arrears? The calls in arrears is the amount the defaulter shareholder calls up by the company, whereas the calls in advance is the advanced amount. तो ये क्या defaulter amount है और ये क्या advanced amount received from the shareholders in the company. The calls in arrears can be recovered and the calls in advance can be adjusted in the future. Okay. So calls in arrears, they can be recovered and the calls in advance can be adjusted in the future. The interest on the calls in arrears is 10% maximum. However, the interest in the calls in advance is 12% maximum. Okay. तो calls in arrears के ऊपर जो interest rate लगता है that is 10%. However, in the calls in advance it is 12%. Now, let us talk about the conclusion. When the shareholders or the company demand the payment regarding a portion of the share, it can be understood as a call. अगर एक portion of share में से company demand कर रही है, that means it's a call. If the call remains uncalled until making the balance sheet, then it should be displayed as the separate item. On the other side of the balance sheet is liabilities. अगर uncalled है तो जो अमाउंट है उसको हम क्या दिखाएंगे? सेपरेट आइटम्स अंडर द हेड लायबिलिटीज. फर्दर द इंटरेस्ट इन द कॉल्स इन एडवांस शुड बी कैलकुलेटेड बिटवीन द टाइम ऑफ द कॉल मनी इज रिसीव्ड एंड द डेट ऑफ द ड्यू पेमेंट. जिस दिन पेमेंट हो गई है उस दिन और जिस दिन कॉल का अमाउंट है, कॉल का टाइम है उस दिन, जितने भी दिन होंगे उतने दिन का इंटरेस्ट कैलकुलेट होता है. So this was all about the calls in arrears and calls in advance. So let us just go give a quick revision. Calls in arrears क्या होते हैं? Calls in arrears is something when some shareholder is not able to pay a call on the specified time, on which the 10% interest is charged by the company to the shareholder. However, vice versa in the case of calls in arrears. In the case of the vice versa in the case of calls in advance. In the case of the calls in advance, the company pays the interest to the shareholders for paying the amount of the call in advance. Okay, it is 12% per annum. So 10% per annum for the calls in arrears and 12% per annum for the calls in advance. This was the basic distinction between the calls in arrears and the calls in advance. I hope you have understood the topic. Thank you so much.